And if wars, empires, collapses, and governments that rise and disappear had already been revealed centuries before they happened? We look at history and see power rising and falling. Babylon, the Great One, disappeared. Rome, the Eternal One, fragmented. But the question remains, who is really writing this story? More than 2,600 years ago, a young Hebrew named Daniel had a vision that defied all human logic. He saw 4 creatures rising from an agitated sea. They were not ordinary animals. They were keys. Keys to understand the rise and fall of nations, and a power that would dare to challenge the very Creator. This video is not only about the past. It is about a prophecy that was fulfilled and another that is still being fulfilled. So I ask you, are you ready to see what Daniel saw? In the midst of human relationships, it is impossible to ignore how each person carries unique marks, traits that distinguish stories, temperaments, and paths. This diversity draws attention because it reveals that life never repeats itself. It expresses itself in nuances that shape entire families. Creation reflects this same principle. In contact with the animal world, it is easy to notice singular behaviors, particular instincts, and forms that break any simple pattern. The variety that exists in what God created awakens admiration and invites us to look at the world more deeply, as if each being were a silent message about the greatness of the Creator, who does not limit His work to repetitions, but to details that reveal His character. This understanding becomes even more intense when the gaze turns to chapter 7 of Daniel, where the prophet receives a vision marked by symbolic creatures, distinct from anything known in everyday reality. There, the forms stopped following the ordinary and took on deep spiritual meanings, guiding Daniel to perceive events that went beyond the present time. Different animals appeared with aspects inexplicable by natural logic, and each one carried a message that echoed through generations. The vision was not only a sequence of strange images, but a revelation about the unfolding of human history under the sovereign gaze of God. You have noticed that the chapters of the book of Daniel do not follow a traditional chronological order, for the book presents its message through visions that intertwine and traverse distinct times, revealing divine action in history. This characteristic invites the reader to see the prophecy as a spiritual narrative, and not as a simple linear record. Just as in a family, each person carries unique traits that form a rich and diverse mosaic, the biblical text also organizes its elements according to its own needs, revealing aspects that can only be understood when seen as a whole. In the same way, in nature, we observe the variety that God expresses in His creation. And in a zoo, this diversity appears so evident that it awakens admiration and fascination. It is this same symbolic variety that appears in chapter 7, when Daniel receives a vision that presents animals with unusual forms and profound meanings, destined to convey spiritual messages about the course of human history. In chapter 7, God introduces Daniel into a scenario that completely breaks with the natural, displaying creatures whose appearance surpasses any familiar reference, revealing that their function is not zoological but prophetic. Each animal has its own characteristics that were not presented to produce superficial astonishment, but to communicate truths that would shape the prophet's understanding of the future of the kingdoms of the earth. These extraordinary beings carry messages about empires, about movements of power, and about spiritual conflicts that extend through generations.
Observing these figures is to open the heart to discern meanings not found in appearance, but in the divine purpose that sustains each detail. Therefore, when we carefully analyze these characteristics, we are invited to understand not only what Daniel saw, but what God desired to reveal through such impressive symbols loaded with historical and spiritual depth.
Shortly before the events mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar had gone through a deep transformation by recognizing divine sovereignty, but his grandson Belshazzar walked in the opposite direction, giving himself over to pride and rebellion that distanced him completely from spiritual sensibility. While one had learned through pain to bow the heart before God, the other despised everything that had already been revealed, treating divine truths with indifference. It is in this scenario of moral decadence that Daniel's vision gains even more strength, for the prophet describes the sea as a symbol of peoples and nations, a continuous movement that reveals how humanity stirs throughout history. From the waters arise four imposing creatures, each one representing empires that would rise, leading the world through paths of power and conflict under the attentive gaze of the one who governs above all kingdoms. Each of the beasts carries unique traits that reveal the behavior and essence of the empires that would dominate entire eras, reflecting distinct ways of exercising authority and controlling entire peoples. Some would rule with apparent stability, others with evident brutality, but all would reveal the same truth. No human power remains without limits when God decides to intervene. The fourth creature, however, stands out for its indescribable ferocity, presented as terrible, astonishing, and extraordinarily strong, endowed with iron teeth that tear, break, and crush everything around it. Its dominion surpasses the logic of the previous kingdoms, and the 10 horns it carries appear as signs of a severe, multiple, and devastating power, showing that this empire would possess reach and strength never before seen, marking history with intensity that Daniel could understand only through divine revelation. The 10 horns mentioned in the vision represent the kings who would arise after the Roman Empire ceased to sustain its unified strength, a process that happened around 476 AD, when the political structure that once dominated the known world began to fall apart in the face of invasions and internal instabilities. Each horn symbolizes a leader who would rise over part of the territory once controlled by Rome, giving rise to new kingdoms that would inherit part of the influence, but never the full greatness of the ancient empire. This fragmentation did not occur by chance. It had already been announced centuries earlier in the revelation given by God to Nebuchadnezzar and interpreted by Daniel, where the statue in the dream presented divided feet, revealing that the unity of the last great power would be broken. When the iron mixed with clay, it was already pointing to a world that would not unite completely again. And now, in the vision of the beasts, this truth is confirmed by the image of the horns that emerge as signs of a future marked by a multiplicity of kingdoms, all limited in their strength and sustained only as long as God allowed them to remain on earth.
By observing these 10 horns, Daniel not only saw the historical succession of the kingdoms that would be born from the Roman collapse, but also perceived the divine hand guiding every detail of this process, showing that even what seems to result from wars, invasions, and political disputes unfolds within the prophetic course planned by God. The kingdoms formed from this division would not share the solidity Rome once had, and each would carry its own characteristics, shaped by different peoples, beliefs, and cultures. This diversity reinforces the message revealed in chapter 2. The world after Rome would be a mixture of strengths, fragilities, and contrasts, never again achieving the unity that marked the previous empires. The vision of the beasts amplifies this understanding, revealing that human history follows lines drawn long before, and that no kingdom, however great it may seem, has enough power to silence the voice that announces the paths determined by the Creator. This prophetic sequence shows that the fragmentation of the political world is not a sign of disorder, but part of the divine purpose that is fulfilled with precision throughout the ages. When Daniel observes carefully the 10 horns that had already appeared, he notices something unexpected. Among them, a small horn begins to grow, discreet at first, but soon drawing attention for having characteristics that none of the others possessed. It had eyes like the eyes of a man, revealing intelligence, strategy, and intentionality, and its mouth uttered arrogant words, demonstrating a proud spirit and a posture of authority that did not come from military strength, but from moral, religious, and political influence. This figure stands out not because of size, but because of boldness, assuming a role that is not limited to the human sphere, for it acts as one who claims spiritual prerogatives that belong only to God. The description makes clear that this is a singular power, shaped by human characteristics, but driven by ambitions that exceed any acceptable limit, becoming a symbol of arrogance before the Creator. This little horn represents a system that would rise with grandiose pretensions and authority, capable of influencing multitudes, sustained not by war power, but by the power of words, doctrine, and the imposition of ideas. As the prophecy reveals, it would persecute the saints of the Most High, using its dominion to pressure, oppress, and attempt to silence those who remained faithful to God. It would also seek to alter times and laws, trying to modify what the Creator Himself established as foundation for His people. This attempt to reshape what is divine reveals its true nature, a power that sets itself in direct opposition to heaven, intentionally shifting attention and obedience from God to itself. However, even exercising influence for a long period, its activity would not be eternal. The prophetic text states that its dominion would last only within a determined time, marked by the limit imposed by the Most High, making clear that no system, no matter how audacious it may seem, can surpass the boundaries established by the divine plan.
The vision leads Daniel to a scenario that surpasses any earthly reality, revealing the moment when the heavenly judgment is presented before his eyes. Thrones are placed with indescribable majesty, and the Ancient of Days sits with an authority that no human mind could dare compare. His garments possess the purity of freshly fallen snow, conveying the absolute holiness of the one who rules above all kingdoms. The hair, compared to pure wool, expresses eternal wisdom and glorious presence. The throne, enveloped in living flames, manifests justice that consumes every form of deceit, and its wheels, burning intensely, reveal a movement that never ceases, reminding the universe that the divine government is active, vigilant, and perfect. The atmosphere is filled with reverence, for the scene does not describe only power, but the essence of the God who judges with infallible truth. This scene conveys the depth of divine holiness, for each element directs the heart to the understanding that judgment belongs to the Creator and not to human systems that attempt to dominate the earth. The brightness of the fire around the throne announces that nothing impure can remain before him, and each detail reveals that his decision is not arbitrary, but grounded in the justice that sustains the universe. Daniel perceives that this is not only a tribunal, but a manifestation of supreme authority, where human time finds its true meaning before the one who controls it. The nations and the powers previously described are not ignored, but evaluated according to the upright divine measure. The vision creates a powerful contrast between the empires that rise with arrogance and the God who sits with eternal majesty, making clear that all human dominion is temporary, while the judgment of the Most High remains forever. The sequence of empires revealed in the prophecy presents a grand panorama of the movement of history under the gaze of the one who directs all ages. Babylon, which dominated from 605 BC to 539 BC, emerges as the first great kingdom represented in the vision. Its splendor, military strength, and cultural influence marked that period as an era of brilliance, but also of pride. Then the dominion passes to Medo-Persia, governing from 539 BC to 331 BC, an empire that rose with conquering vigor, expanding borders and shaping political paths that would cross generations. Soon after, the prophecy presents Greece, vigorous between 331 BC and 168 BC, bringing to the world the mark of Alexander and his rapid expansion, whose cultural impact extended far beyond military strength. Finally,
comes Rome, established from 168 BC to 476 AD. Powerful, structured, disciplined, and so vast that its influence echoes to this day.
Each of these empires is not seen merely as a historical power, but as part of a prophetic scenario drawn with divine precision. Babylon represented the brilliance that dissolves before divine sovereignty. Medo-Persia symbolized the strength God uses to bring down pride. Greece revealed the speed of human movements that do not resist time. And Rome, with its grandeur, demonstrated that even the greatest of kingdoms has limits defined by the Creator. These periods do not appear as cold dates, but as testimonies that history walks according to the plan established from the beginning. By observing this timeline, we understand that no power rises without God allowing it, and none remains beyond the time determined by Him. Each kingdom fulfilled a role within the revelation, preparing the ground for the events that would unfold until the judgment presented in the vision, where all human power finds its end before the eternal authority of the Ancient of Days. The image reveals the sequence of the great empires announced in the prophecies, each represented by symbolic figures that translate their identity and role within the divine plan. These symbols serve not only as historical illustrations, but as signs that unite human time to the eternal purpose. They show that the rise and fall of kingdoms does not depend on chance, but on a line carefully guided by the Creator. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome appear not only as political powers, but as pieces of a larger narrative that points to God's sovereign rule over Earth's events. The image, by bringing together these representations, transforms dates and names into visual testimonies of divine faithfulness, reminding that each prophetic detail follows a purpose defined before the nations existed. The symbols presented in the image allow us to understand that each kingdom possessed its own characteristics, translated by animals or figures that express strength, speed, intelligence, ferocity, or dominion. These visual details help capture the spirit of each empire, showing how their natures influenced entire civilizations and shaped complete eras. When contemplating this succession, it becomes evident that none of these powers remained beyond the determined time, no matter how imposing they seemed. The image, therefore, functions as a window into the prophecy, uniting history and revelation in a single panorama. It reaffirms that the Word of God does not fail, and that the kingdoms of this world, represented by these symbols, always end up giving way to the eternal kingdom of the one who judges with justice and rules with absolute authority.
The events presented in chapter 2 of the book of Daniel offer a solid foundation for understanding the symbols described in the vision of chapter 7, for both accounts form two complementary perspectives of the same prophetic sequence. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the statue, composed of different materials, demonstrates the fragility and transience of human kingdoms, while in chapter 7, these same powers are represented by living creatures, revealing their nature, their behavior, and the spirit that would guide each dominion. Although they do not follow a linear chronological order, the prophecies connect as two parts of the same picture, where God reveals to the king what would happen on earth and shows the prophet what lies behind these movements, both in the human and spiritual sphere. Thus, each detail of one chapter illuminates the other, allowing the divine message to be seen with increasing depth. The absence of linearity does not mean disorganization, but rather a structure that invites the reader to perceive that God reveals His plans in layers, deepening understanding as new visions unfold. While chapter 2 presents the succession of kingdoms from a broad perspective, showing the advancement of human history until the moment when the eternal kingdom is established, chapter 7 exposes the interior of these empires, revealing the spiritual character that moves each of them and the conflict involved in their rise. Together,
These chapters form a prophetic dialogue where symbols, images, and dates intertwine, showing that history is not driven merely by the strength of rulers, but by the sovereign hand that directs the course of nations. In this way, by uniting the two visions, Daniel presents a complete revelation that strengthens faith and confirms that nothing escapes the gaze of the one who governs all things. Before the revelations presented in the prophecy, it becomes impossible to ignore the message that crosses the centuries and reaches the heart with irresistible force. All human kingdoms are temporary. The greatness of Babylon vanished. The vigor of Medo-Persia faded. The brilliance of Greece became memory, and the power of Rome, which seemed unshakable, also met its limit. Daniel shows that no throne built by human hands remains forever, for all of them carry within themselves the fragility of humanity itself. In absolute contrast arises the divine promise, affirming that only the kingdom established by God has eternity as its foundation. This kingdom does not depend on military strength, political strategies, or earthly alliances. It is born from the will of the Most High, and its existence transcends time, history, and human understanding itself, revealing that true sovereignty does not belong to men, but to the Creator.
The prophecy declares that when all the governments of earth have fulfilled their role and disappeared before divine judgment, the dominion will be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. This promise does not describe only a distant future, but offers present hope, reminding that God is preparing a kingdom of justice, truth, and peace, where there will be no oppression, violence, or corruption. Every revelation in the book of Daniel points to this glorious moment, when human power will be silenced and divine authority will become fully visible. Thus, when contemplating these visions, the heart is invited to trust not in the stability of nations, but in the firmness of the God who leads history toward his final purpose. The prophetic message, therefore, not only clarifies the past and the future, but transforms the way we see the present, ensuring that those who remain faithful will inherit a kingdom that will never pass. The choice each person makes before divine revelations is not merely momentary, but carries eternal weight. For God continually extends the invitation to participate in his kingdom of justice, peace, and love. This kingdom does not rely on human structures, does not depend on passing glories, and is not shaken by the instability of times. It is born from the character of God himself, perfect in holiness and faithful in all promises. When we understand that the kingdoms of this world pass away while the divine kingdom remains firm, our heart is called to reflect sincerely on where our trust is being placed. God does not force this decision, but presents it with tenderness and truth, showing that the path of eternal life is open to all who desire to walk the path of faithfulness. The choice is offered with love, but the responsibility of responding rests on each heart. For no one else can decide for us what will define the course of our eternity. Before this invitation, we are called to make a conscious, profound, and transformative decision, to live in obedience, faithfulness, and total surrender to the Lord. This surrender is not built on fear, but on trust in the God who leads history and sustains each life with purpose and mercy. By choosing to walk with him, we abandon the illusion of security offered by the kingdoms of earth and find stability in what is eternal. Daily faithfulness, expressed in simple choices and sincere attitudes, shapes our character and places us among those who will inherit the kingdom that will never end. May today be the day in which the heart leans toward this decision, allowing divine hope to illuminate each step and giving the Creator the necessary space to transform our existence. Thus, living under his direction, we will be prepared to receive the promised kingdom, where justice triumphs, peace remains, and love reigns forever. We thank you immensely for having followed this deep journey through chapter 7 of Daniel. We have seen that all human kingdoms have an expiration date, but the promise of the kingdom of God is eternal. The great revelation of Daniel is clear.
No matter the chaos or the power that rises in this world, the Ancient of Days is on the throne, and his judgment is just and definitive. If this message touched your heart and confirmed your hope in the kingdom that does not pass, leave your like on this video. It is the way you tell us that the content was relevant. And to continue deepening your knowledge in the prophecies and in the Word of God, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Every week we have new studies prepared for you. May you live this faithfulness today. May the sovereignty of God be your greatest certainty. Until the next video,